This is a review of The Haunting of Toby Jugg by Dennis Wheatley. I will warn you in a few moments about spoilers. This section of the review will be mostly spoiler-free. The Haunting of Toby Jugg by Dennis Wheatley is an excellent thriller. You are not seeing a book on my desk right now because while I read this book many years ago, I just happened to come across the audiobook version read by someone on YouTube. I must say that they did an excellent rendition. The reader's voice conveys a deep sense of fear, as if he was indeed breathlessly retelling horrific events that had just happened to him personally, which is, after all, how the book is presented, as an ongoing diary of events as they unfold. I will link to the audiobook and put some images of the cover and such up while I speak. The author, Dennis Wheatley, is sadly little known with younger people, but he was a huge name in thrillers of his own time. He wrote the spy books that are sometimes said to have inspired Ian Fleming's James Bond, and a number of horror novels that made it to the big screen, things such as The Devil Rides Out, which I have neither read nor watched, since horror is generally not my favourite genre. Wheatley knew a fair bit about the occult and intelligence work, and knew some famous occultists of his era, including Aleister Crowley, whose brand of magical thinking does rather permeate this story. Wheatley draws on real-life events and scandals to colour his narrative, and someone who knows a little about the hidden history of that time, or even modern occulted events, will find it very interesting, although the novel does stand perfectly well on its own merits as a potboiler. The story unfolds as a series of diary entries, and the reader, as I have already said, is wonderful at creating an atmosphere of growing fear and uncertainty as the tension builds. If you are reading the text, you will have to supply the voice yourself. It takes place in a single location, an isolated country house during World War II, where the protagonist, a crippled fighter pilot, is on the cusp of inheriting his huge family fortune. It is a surprisingly long audiobook, and I guess that as a youth my reading was either much faster than it is now, or perhaps I read more quickly and shallowly than I remember. I highly recommend it to horror and thriller fans. Wheatley has a good descriptive style of writing and masterfully builds the tension as events progress. In 2006, a movie, The Haunted Airman, was made, being a very loose adaptation, and that, as far as I can see from what I've read of it, bears zero actual relation to the book. I am about to go over mostly spoiler-free plot points. If you want to listen or read totally fresh, then tune out in just a moment, I shall warn you. However, please do come back after listening or reading and leave a comment about what you think of the book here. I don't get on YouTube or BitChute all that often, but when I do, it would be rather nice to hear some other opinions. Minor plot spoilers in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. A Toby Jugg, which is the name of the protagonist, is a mug or stein made in the shape of a head, and that is why the protagonist, whose family name is Jugg, got the nickname Toby from his mother before she died in childbirth. I should put a picture up here on the screen. Since I don't have a copy of the book, it'll be something to put up. We start the book with our hero, Toby, wheelchair-bound and recuperating in an isolated Welsh manor house. He is in the care of his former schoolmaster and tutor, Helmut, who is also running the estate for Toby, an ex-fighter pilot who's been crippled in combat. Toby is set to inherit the Jugg millions upon his rapidly approaching birthday. Up until that point, the money inherited from his grandfather's industrial empire has been controlled by a board of trustees, of which Helmut is one. Toby is writing a diary to organize his thoughts, at first anyway. Later, he hides the chronicle in his stamp collection in the hope that if he does succumb to the perceived demonic attack, someone, possibly Julia, his aunt, will receive and discover the truth about these events. The horror that visits Toby at night is a shadow cast upon his floor by the moonlight that seeps under his blackout curtains, which are short. This shadow he feels deep inside to be some demonic being intent upon getting at him, although he also fears that he is losing his mind as a progression of the injury that has already left him wheelchair-bound. We ourselves do not know the truth at this point, being bound to see the world only through Toby's description. We learn through the narrative that his blood uncle and Julia, his aunt by marriage, are his legal guardians and have not responded to letters that he has sent asking them to come and remove him from the isolated Welsh house. Upon discovering, by chance meeting with a postman whilst fishing, that Helmut has been stopping his letters both in and outgoing, Toby becomes more and more paranoid that his old schoolmaster and tutor is planning to drive him insane and steal control of his fortune. This part of the book is a great psychological thriller, and the ensuing battle of wits is very exciting. We also learn about the life of Toby, and how he went to a school where atheism and amoral sexual indulgences were encouraged. Now, this part really surprised me because I had thought that such a school was merely a product of Wheatley's fevered imagination. However, he based it upon a real school which existed at that time, and which was investigated by MI5 for its unusual methods of child rearing and links to hostile powers. The real school was closed in the 80s amid a scandal about drunkenness and drug use, and a new school rose in its place, staffed mainly by the former teachers of the old school. It is still in operation, as far as I know. I totally missed the Crowleyan "do what thou wilt" reference in regards to this school when I read the book years ago, but it stood out as to an older me in the audio version. And it's here, at the school, that we first catch wind of the Brotherhood, a supposedly Masonic lodge the schoolmasters maintain in a ruined church. Toby recounts breaking the only rule at the school and sneaking up to observe a lodge meeting before fleeing in terror at an unknown feeling of doom. Helmut is a master at this school and later becomes Toby's tutor, friend, and mentor as his aunt and uncle ready Toby to take over the industrial empire that he will inherit. Anyway, as bit by bit we learn about Toby's life, we see him run away to join the RAF as World War II breaks out. This is instead of going with Helmut on a world tour to finish his education. In his diary, Toby recounts how life in the RAF changed his outlook from the sneering, jaded elitism that he imbibed at school. This is the main reason for the events unfolding as they do once Toby is once again in Helmut's power. The plot twists are pretty good, as Toby, in turn, thinks that he has lost his senses, or that he is doomed, or even that he has triumphed over Helmut, only to have his perception of reality crushed time and time again. I really like the way that Wheatley hides information in the narrative that the protagonist could or should have noticed, so that as we get each big reveal, it's almost always an "oh, of course" moment. We learn the true depths of the Brotherhood plums, and how far it reaches, as well as the truth about Toby and his mental state. This book has layers of story that make it rather like unpacking a Russian nesting doll. In a sense, this book is also something of a political thriller and a social commentary, as well as a psychological melodrama and horror novel. You should note that Toby has a few attitudes that were normal for his class and time, but might possibly grate in our more politically correct ones. He's got a pretty personable nature, though, and you can't help but root for him, and he does lack deliberate malice. The climax of the book is okay, but only okay. It does let down the book just a little. After all the build-up, we were looking forward to something a bit better. It depends on events fitting perfectly together. Although Toby does have a glib explanation as to why this is so, it does come across as a little ghost in the machine. Okay, rating. Ease of reading, 3 or 4. It's not exactly hard. It's about on the Harry Potter level. The audio version that is linked was gripping. Engagement value is 5. It was very exciting, with plenty of plot twists to keep your attention. Fun value, 4. It can get a bit dark, so I'll drop a point from 5. Language use is 3 to 4. As I've noticed how sad it is that novels seem to, in my opinion, be dropping the vocabulary level by several grades as the decades go on. Reread value is, I'd say, 2 or 3. Once you know the plot, you may want to reread it or hear it again in a few years, but not really more urgently than that. Okay, go listen to it or get the book and read it, and then please come back and leave a comment.